Can I get appearances, please, starting with the government?
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Madeline Levin, and today I represent the United States government. I'm joined by my second chair, Mr. Jackson Cundy.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury.
Good afternoon.
His audio and video will be off throughout today's proceedings, but he'll be here assisting me with any technical matters.
Thank you, Mr. Cundy. Mr. Marx, appearances, please, for the defendant.
Of course. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name's Ethan Marx, joined today by my second chair, Mr. Michael Ragnoni. Just again, like opposing counsel, he'll be behind the scenes today handling all the tech as we represent the defendant, Kara Bassett.
Terrific. Are there any housekeeping matters from the government?
Yes, Your Honor. We would like to invoke Rules 615 and 603. All witnesses are constructively sequestered, and they've all been constructively sworn.
Okay.
Second, we'd like to note that pursuant to pretrial order 7, exhibits 4 through 33 have already been entered. They can be referenced at any time.
Well, I don't think exhibit 5 is any longer in the record, right? Because subject to the late change in the pretrial order, that witness will be appearing live, but otherwise that's correct.
And with that, Your Honor, the government is ready to proceed with opening statements.
Thank you, Ms. Levin. Mr. Marx, anything additional?
Yes, Your Honor. Going hand in hand with pretrial order 7, we just wanted to make the court aware, per pretrial order 6, that the court is allowed, due to the technical nature of today's trial, that we can display any exhibit already in evidence to the jury at any time.
Yes. Anything else?
And with that, the defense is ready to proceed.
Great. I'll encourage all of our judges to use speaker view as they watch our opening statements. Ms. Levin, the floor is yours.
She wanted control. She killed for it. It's August 18th, 2017. At an elephant park in Tallahassee, Florida, a woman named Kara Bassett stands in front of a locked storage unit. She pulls out her keys, lets herself in, and it's there that she picks up a syringe of carfentanil. It's a drug so dangerous, it's 5,000 times more toxic than heroin. It's a drug she's about to use to murder her husband. Members of the jury, that woman and her husband, Don Clark, owned and lived at an elephant park, a zoo. But Miss Bassett wasn't happy with the way things were being run. She wanted to turn that park into an elephant sanctuary. And her husband was the only person standing in her way. So on August 18th, Miss Bassett creeps into her husband's bedroom where he lays sleeping, injects him with that lethal drug. Kara Bassett watches as her husband dies. And then you'll learn how she tried to cover up her crime. She drove her husband's body to a swamp 2 hours from her home, dragged him and the tranquilizer that killed him into the marsh, then drove another 2 hours back across the state to leave that vehicle empty and abandoned at an airport. A week later, she picks up the phone, calls the police, reports she needs help, her husband is missing, but members of the jury, you'll learn she never wanted her husband to be found. That's why today, the government has charged Kara Bassett with first-degree murder. We have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant caused the death of her husband and that she did so with malice aforethought, meaning she did so intentionally. We're confident we'll meet that burden. Because you'll hear today that the defendant had a motive. You'll learn about a power of attorney. It's a document that offered Miss Bassett full control over her husband's elephant park if he ever disappeared. And just months later, Don Clark was never seen again. And you'll hear from lead FBI agent Steph Branham that the defendant had the means to carry out the crime. You'll hear about a syringe of carfentanil. It's a drug so dangerous, just a milligram can kill someone. You'll learn that when Don Clark went missing, a syringe of carfentanil went missing from the elephant park, too. And you'll hear from forensic expert Jewel Grieve. She'll tell you about algae samples that she collected. Algae samples found at Big Gum Swamp, the same algae on Miss Bassett's boots, the same algae on the gas pedal of the van. The same van the defendant used to drive her husband's body to the swamp. Members of the jury, you'll learn today that the defendant wanted control. You'll learn she killed for it. It's that simple. That's why, at the end of today's trial, I'll ask you to find Kara Bassett guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Levin. Mr. Marx?
Yes, Your Honor. Judge Bernstein, Ms. Levin, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Lisa Clark. But when Ms. Levin spoke to you just a moment ago, that's a name she didn't mention once. That's because the government, they don't want you to know who Lisa Clark is. Today you're going to hear about an investigation. An investigation that you'll, of the dozens of suspects, the FBI couldn't find an alibi for a single one. An investigation where you'll learn the FBI, in their thorough search of the alleged crime scene, couldn't find any evidence that the victim's body was actually there. And an investigation where you'll learn the FBI cast all of that aside and locked onto one suspect, Kara Bassett. But when you lock onto a target, analyze it through a microscope, sometimes you can fail to see what's right in front of you. Today you're going to learn that there was another suspect. A suspect that you'll learn had been seen threatening Don Clark in the past. A suspect that you'll learn Don had called the police on, and a suspect that you'll learn was never even investigated by the FBI. That suspect is Lisa Clark, Don Clark's ex-wife. They've got the wrong spouse, and they're telling the wrong story. Today, we're going to tell you about the right spouse, Lisa Clark. You'll learn that Lisa had been seen on the Clark residence, threatening to kill Don, shouting that she would wipe him off the face of the earth. And not only that, you'll learn that Lisa was suing Don for $2 million and that for 2 years, she hadn't gotten a single penny. So on August 18th, 2017, when Lisa sent Don this text saying that she was tired of dealing with the attorney, and he cast her aside, you'll learn that that's when Lisa Clark took matters into her own hands. She did exactly what she said she was going to do. She didn't kill for control. She killed for revenge. They've got the wrong spouse, and they're telling the wrong story. That's because in the FBI's entire investigation, they never even considered Lisa Clark to be a suspect. Instead, they latched onto one spouse and one story, Kara Bassett. But when Miss Bassett came to court today, she was presumed to be innocent. And she still is, unless the government can prove every single part of their charge beyond a reasonable doubt. But ladies and gentlemen, they can't just prove to you that it could have been Kara Bassett. They must prove to you that it could only have been Kara Bassett, that it could not have been Lisa Clark. But they won't be able to do that because they've got the wrong spouse and they're telling the wrong story. And now today, we don't have we don't have to ask a single question, present a single piece of evidence, or call a single witness, but we're going to. Today, you're going to hear from Miss Jo Young, a television producer that worked with Don for 2 years. Miss Young, rather, will tell you that from what she saw, Don and Kara were happy and in love, and that the only person angry at Don was Lisa Clark. Miss Bassett didn't kill for control. You'll learn that it was Lisa who killed for revenge, who did exactly what she said she was going to do. Wipe him off the face of the earth. They've got the wrong spouse, and they're telling the wrong story. It's why I'll come back before you at the end of today's trial and ask that you find Miss Bassett not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Ms. Levin, you can call your first witness. I'll encourage all of our judges to switch to gallery view.
At this time, the government calls Agent Branham to the witness stand.
You can proceed.
Good afternoon, Agent.
Good afternoon.
What do you do for a living?
I'm an FBI agent, ma'am.
How are you qualified as an FBI agent?
In 1982, I graduated from the University of Cincinnati with a degree in psychology. I became a special agent in 2003 and a senior special agent in 2012.
How are you involved in today's case?
On August 25th, I was called to this case, a missing persons report. The defendant called the Tallahassee police, and I reported on scene.
According to Miss Bassett, when had Don Clark gone missing?
August 18th, 2017.
Agent, at the conclusion of your investigation, did you make any arrests?
Yes, ma'am, we did make an arrest.
Who did you arrest?
After conducting a thorough investigation, we arrested the defendant for the murder of her husband.
Let's walk through the steps in that investigation, beginning with interviews. Did the FBI ever interview the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
Did the defendant tell you where she and her husband lived?
Yes, ma'am. They lived together at the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park.
Did the defendant tell you if she had any conflicts with her husband?
Yes, ma'am. The defendant said that she wanted an elephant sanctuary, and she felt that Mr. Clark would never let her make that change to the elephant park.
Agent, do you know if there was any way that the defendant could gain control over that elephant park?
I did. Miss Bassett and Mr. Clark had Mr. Clark sign a power of attorney document in May of 2017.
Mr. Cundy, could we get Exhibit 15 up for the jury? Agent, is this the power of attorney you just mentioned?
Yes, ma'am.
According to this document, under what circumstances would the defendant gain control over that elephant park?
If Mr. Clark was no longer mentally or physically able to control his assets, or if Mr. Clark ever disappeared.
Let's focus on that second possibility, disappearance. Mr. Cundy, could we get Exhibit 4 up for the jury? Agent, do you recognize this?
That appears to be a letter we received from Mr. Clark's attorney.
Did Mr. Clark's attorney tell you anything about the disappearance clause in the power of attorney?
Mr. Clark's attorney said that it was highly irregular.
Did she say why the clause had been included?
Well, it says here it was the defendant who insisted that the clause be included.
Agent, let's move now to physical evidence. What physical evidence led to your ultimate arrest of the defendant?
Three main pieces, ma'am. Syringes of carfentanil, GPS evidence, and a forensic test.
Let's walk through those three pieces one by one, beginning with the syringes. Where did you locate those?
The syringes were stored in a facility at the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park.
Did the defendant tell you what drug was in those syringes?
Carfentanil.
Mr. Cundy, could we get Exhibit 17 up for the jury? This is an information sheet on carfentanil. It's already been admitted. Agent, do you know if carfentanil is dangerous?
Yes, ma'am. It's 5,000 times more toxic than heroin. 1 milligram is fatal to a human.
Do you know if the defendant was aware of the dangers of carfentanil?
Yes, ma'am. When we asked her about the syringes, she laughed and said that only a few drops could kill someone.
Agent, when you searched the Elephant Park, how many syringes of carfentanil were there?
When we searched at the Elephant Park, we counted 23 syringes.
Was that the number of syringes you expected to find?
No, ma'am. We expected to find 24, indicating that one was missing and unaccounted for.
Why did you expect to find 24?
Well, there was a logbook at the park that had a record of all of the syringes and when they were taken.
Agent, let's move now to that second piece of physical evidence, the GPS data. Where did you obtain that data from?
The Elephant Park's van, which we found at the Belle Airport, it was unlocked, empty, and abandoned.
Mr. Cundy, could we get Exhibit 31 up for the jury? These are the GPS records Agent Branham obtained. Agent, looking at this third summary map, could you tell us the route that the Elephant Park's van took on the night of August 18th?
Yes, ma'am. The vehicle was driven 139 miles from the park to the Big Gum Swamp, starting at 11:17 p.m., and then was driven to the airport.
Agent, let's talk about that third piece of evidence you mentioned, the forensic evidence. What pieces of forensic evidence did you collect?
Well, ma'am, we collected samples of mud that we found on the gas pedals of the driver's side of the van. We also found that same mud on the defendant's boots, and we compared these samples to samples of algae from the Big Gum Swamp.
Did you conduct a forensic test on these samples of algae and mud?
Well, ma'am, we sent those samples to our analyst.
And did those samples help you in deciding whether or not to arrest the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
Agent, you told us earlier that Don Clark went missing on August 18th. When did you locate the van?
We located the van 7 days after August 18th.
If Don Clark went missing on the 18th, why'd you wait 7 days to locate the van?
Well, ma'am, it wasn't us who waited. The defendant reported him missing 7 days after he supposedly disappeared.
Thank you, Agent. Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Levin. Mr. Marx, you can proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Agent, I want to start by talking about the evidence that supports your timeline. Agent, I want to start with the first part of that timeline. You believe that Don Clark's vehicle, it left the Elephant Park at 11:17 p.m., isn't that right?
That's right, sir.
But before that, that's when you believe Miss Bassett was killing, right?
Before 11:17 p.m.?
Yes, sir. Before 11:17 p.m., you believe that's when he was killed, right?
Well, we're not entirely sure, but we believe that, yes, it would be around 11:17 p.m.
You don't have any eyewitnesses to that murder, do you, sir?
No, sir.
Don't have any eyewitnesses that saw Miss Bassett yielding one of those carfentanil syringes on August 18th, do you?
Not an eyewitness, no.
You know that there are other people who have access to those carfentanil syringes, right?
We are aware that other park employees did have access to the storage facility, yes.
You don't have alibis for those other park employees, do you?
There were 2 park employees, but that's all.
And sir, those 2 park employees, you don't have alibis for them, do you?
That's right, sir.
And sir, you don't, let's talk about what you believe happened at 11:17 p.m. You believe Miss Bassett drove the car to the Big Gum Swamp, right?
That is correct.
You didn't find any of Miss Bassett's DNA at the Big Gum Swamp, did you?
DNA evidence? No, sir.
You didn't find any tread impressions that matched Miss Bassett's boots at the Big Gum Swamp, did you?
That is correct.
Didn't find any tread impressions matching the wheelchair you recovered from the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park, do you?
That is correct.
In fact, sir, you couldn't even recover Don Clark's body from the Big Gum Swamp. Isn't that right?
That is also correct.
So let's talk about the next part of your timeline. After the car was at the Big Gum Swamp, you believe it was driven at 2:10 a.m. to the Cary-Belleone Airport, right?
As the GPS records indicate, that is correct.
Sir, you said on direct examination, I wrote it down, said that you were the ones who recovered that car. Isn't that right?
We located the car once the defendant had told us that she had found it at the Cary-Belleone Airport.
Right, the defendant was the one who located that car, right?
That is correct.
And sir, you searched that airplane hangar, didn't you?
We did search the Belleone Airport, and we did search the hangars at the airport. That is correct.
One of the hangars you searched was Don and Kara's private hangar, right?
That is correct.
You didn't find any of Miss Bassett's fingerprints in that private hangar, did you?
No, sir.
All right, sir. We've talked about the physical evidence you have in today's case. Want to shift gears and talk about the motive. You don't have any eyewitness reports of Miss Bassett and her husband arguing on August 18th, do you?
On August 18th, no, sir.
You don't have any eyewitness reports that Don and Kara had an argument in the week before August 18th, do you?
Not in the week before, sir, no.
Don't have any eyewitness reports of Don and Kara arguing in the entire month of August, do you?
In the month of August of 2017, no, sir.
Let's compare that story to the story with Don's other spouse, Lisa Clark. You know who that is, don't you?
We are aware of Lisa Clark, sir, yes.
It's Don's ex-wife, right?
That is correct.
You got a letter from Don's attorney, isn't that right?
Yes.
Don's attorney told you that Lisa would constantly harass Don, didn't she?
That is correct. That is what the letter stated.
The letter also stated that Lisa was suing Don, isn't that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And let's be clear, you tried to talk to Lisa Clark, didn't you?
We did call Lisa Clark.
You brought up her ex-husband, right?
Don Clark? Yes.
When you brought up Don Clark, Lisa said that expletive deserved to die. Isn't that right?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Response, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Your Honor, the statement itself was that expletive, Don Clark, deserved to die. Certainly, Your Honor, we're not offering this statement for the truth of the matter. We certainly don't believe that Don Clark deserved to die. Therefore, Your Honor, under 801C, it's not definitionally hearsay.
Response, Ms. Levin?
Your Honor, if opposing counsel isn't offering this statement for the truth of the matter, then I move my objection to 403, more prejudicial than probative, because in that case, the statement "he deserved to die" would be taken for its truth value that Lisa Clark actually believed that Don Clark deserved to die, and that is more prejudicial than probative for the jury to hear.
Response to that objection, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Your Honor, first of all, it's not being used for the truth of the matter. If the statement was that I believe Don deserved to die, then the truth would be that Lisa believed that. But that's not what the statement was. It was that Don deserved to die. So it's not hearsay. Second, Your Honor, as for the 403, Your Honor, under 403, the prejudicial value has to substantially outweigh the probative value. There's a clear probative value in the jury hearing this statement. That the only statement that Lisa Clark made to the police about her ex-husband was that he deserved to die. Certainly that goes to show that there was someone else who wanted Don Clark dead that was not the defendant.
Your Honor, may I respond to that?
No, the objection is overruled on both grounds.
Agent, just to be clear, Lisa Clark told you that expletive deserved to die, right?
That was Lisa Clark's statement.
You also know that Don had tried to get a restraining order against Lisa. Isn't that right?
Dawn had tried to get a restraining order against Lisa?
Yes, sir. Don tried to get a restraining order against her, right? He considered it.
That is correct.
And Lisa Clark, she refused to cooperate with your investigation. Isn't that right?
She did refuse to cooperate.
Let's compare that to Kara Bassett. Kara Bassett fully cooperated with your investigation, didn't she?
That is correct.
She answered your questions, right?
She did.
In fact, she sat down with you on 12 different occasions, right?
Yes, about a dozen times.
Let's be clear, your investigation didn't start until August 25th, did it?
That is when the defendant had finally filed this missing persons report.
So there was a whole week where you weren't investigating, right?
That is correct.
During that whole week, Miss Bassett didn't burn those boots, did she?
We did not find any evidence that she burned the boots. No, we found those boots.
Miss Bassett didn't destroy that tranquilizer log, did she?
No, sir.
Miss Bassett, she didn't ditch that van somewhere where you didn't find it, right? She told you where it was.
She did after a week, sir, yes.
So, sir, I want to talk now about where Kara Bassett might have been. You know, her cell data placed her at home, right?
That is where her cell phone was, yes.
And, sir, of all the people you spoke to, how many of them refused to be interviewed? I'm looking for a number.
I'm sorry, sir, can you repeat that?
Of course, sir. Looking for a number here. How many individuals that you requested to interview refused that request?
Refused to interview? That was Lisa Clark, only.
So one person, right?
Yes, sir.
So, sir, you don't know where Lisa Clark was on August 18, 2017.
That is correct, sir.
Thank you, Agent. No further questions at the time, Your Honor.
Redirect, Your Honor. Agent, on cross-examination, opposing counsel asked you a few questions about Lisa Clark. We'll talk a little bit about that. Mr. Cundy, could we get Exhibit 21 up for the jury? These are Dawn Clark's phone records. They've been admitted. Agent, according to these records, did Kara Bassett ever try to call her husband after he went missing?
The defendant did not call Dawn Clark after he went missing.
Did the defendant text Dawn Clark after he went missing?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope of cross-examination.
Your Honor, may I respond to that?
Yeah. Yes, you may.
We're about to compare the fact that the defendant didn't call or text her husband when he went missing, but Lisa Clark actually did. She both called and texted him. And Your Honor, that means that this is going to the fact that Lisa Clark is is not a suspect in today's case, the way the defendant was for Agent Branham.
Mr. Marks?
Your Honor, we're fine with them asking about the actions Lisa Clark took. We didn't ask about any cell phone records on cross-examination. This goes beyond the scope of that cross-examination.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
It's not necessary. I'm going to overrule the objection, particularly since those records are already in evidence. Go ahead.
Agent, did the defendant text her husband following her husband's disappearance?
No, ma'am.
Now I want to shift to Lisa Clark. Did Lisa Clark text her husband when Dawn Clark disappeared?
Yes, ma'am, on August 23rd.
What was the specific language of that text?
It says, "Why are you avoiding my calls? If you don't call me back, I will kill you in court."
Was that text sent before or after Dawn Clark disappeared?
This was sent after Dawn Clark disappeared, ma'am.
Thank you, Agent Branham. No further questions.
Mr. Marks, anything else for Agent Branham?
Brief recross, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Agent Branham, Ms. Levin just asked you about some text messages. I want to ask you about one that Lisa Clark sent. Mr. Ragnoni, could you zoom in on the text from August 18th? Lisa says, "I'm tired of the lawyers. Can we please resolve this on our own like adults?" Did I read that correctly, Agent?
Yes, that was the text to the defendant, I believe.
Sir, that was a text to Don Clark, right?
Oh, that is correct. That is correct.
Thank you, Agent. No further questions, Your Honor.
At this time, may this witness please be excused?
Yes, Agent Branham, you are excused. Thank you very much. Government, please call your next witness.
This time, the government calls Jules Grieve.
You can proceed.
Good afternoon, Dr. Grieve.
Good afternoon.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a forensic investigator for the FBI, specifically a forensic biologist and limnologist.
How are you qualified as a forensic analyst?
I have a bachelor in science in biology from Emory University. I then got my PhD in biology from the California Institute of Technology. I completed a postdoctoral fellowship at Harvard University in oceanography, and in 2011, I attended the FBI Forensic Training Academy.
How are you involved in today's case?
I conducted a forensic analysis of all the evidence sent to me.
And did you come to a conclusion at the end of your investigation?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What methodology did you rely on in coming to that conclusion?
I relied upon the methodology taught to me in the FBI Training Academy, specifically DNA profiling, fingerprinting, and light microscopy.
And did you reasonably rely on that methodology in forming your conclusion?
Yes, I did.
At this time, Your Honor, we tender Dr. Jules Grieve as an expert in forensic analysis.
Without objection, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Dr. Grieve, let's talk a little bit about your investigation. What samples did you have access to when you were conducting your forensic tests?
I conducted 3 forensic tests, one on DNA evidence, specifically hairs. I also conducted a fingerprint analysis, as well as algae analysis.
Let's focus on the last 2 that you just mentioned, beginning with the algae evidence. Who gave you samples of algae to test?
Agent Steph Branham's team sent me samples of algae from 14 different locations.
What were those locations?
Samples 1 through 3, it came from a white Chevrolet Express. Samples 4 through 6, it came from the Big Gum Swamp. And samples 7 through 14 came from various locations at the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park.
Did you find that any of those samples were a match?
Yes, we did. Samples 1 through 3 and 4 through 6 matched, as well as 8 through 11.
And could you clarify the locations that matched?
Of course. The gas pedal, brake pedal, and the driver's side floor carpeting of the Chevrolet Express and the defendant's boots, as well as the underside of a wheelchair from the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park, matched with the samples we collected from the Big Gum Swamp.
Doctor, how did you come to the conclusion that all of these samples were a match?
Well, when we received the samples of algae and mud, we put them under a light microscope to look for diatoms or a microscopic algae. And we found that the 2 types of algae on all of these samples were a rare combination together, and that these samples had a precise Redfield ratio that was similar.
Did Agent Branham provide you with any samples of algae from the natural substances at Miss Bassett's Elephant Park?
No, ma'am, we weren't sent any of those.
Were those samples necessary in drawing your conclusion that the samples of algae from Big Gum Swamp and Miss Bassett's boots were a match?
No, it wasn't necessary to have those samples, as the precise Redfield ratio shows it's most likely they all originated from one place.
Doctor, let's move now to the fingerprint testing that you mentioned. Where did you conduct fingerprint testing?
I was sent 28 prints from the interior of a white Chevrolet Express van.
Who did you conclude that those prints belonged to?
All 28 of those prints belong to one of three people: Kara Bassett, the defendant, Don Clark, and Kelsey Stebbins.
Doctor, do any of those prints belong to a woman named Lisa Clark?
No, ma'am, they don't.
Thank you, Doctor. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Marx, you can proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Grieve, there are some things that forensics can't tell us. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Forensics can't tell us how that algae got on Miss Bassett's boots, can it?
No, light microscopy can't determine that.
Forensics can't tell us when that algae got on Miss Bassett's boots, can it?
No, it can't.
Can't tell us if it was on August 18th, 2017.
No, a precise date isn't something we can determine through our testing.
Can't tell us if it was a month before, isn't that right?
That's correct.
In fact, Doctor, you'd agree with me that algae can live on surfaces for multiple months, isn't that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
You also know that algae can be transferred by contact, right?
That's correct, it can be.
We've talked about a lot of algae, so I just want to break this down for the jury. When one substance comes in contact with a second substance, the algae can transfer. That's how it works, right?
Yes, sir.
So I want to talk about how you considered maybe some different algae from another location. You didn't test any samples from any other Florida swamps, did you?
No, I wasn't sent any samples from swamps aside from the Big Gum Swamp.
Right, the only natural substance was from the Big Gum Swamp, isn't that right?
That's correct.
I want to talk about another natural location. You know Miss Bassett works at an elephant park, don't you?
That's correct.
You'd recognize photos of that park, right?
Yes, I would.
Mr. Ragnoni, could we get exhibits 23 through 25 on the screen? They're pre-admitted, Your Honor. Doctor, that's that elephant park, right?
Yes, sir.
Doctor, you know there's mud at that elephant park, don't you?
Yes, that's what the pictures appear.
And you'd agree with me that the samples you collected from Miss Bassett's boots, the wheelchair, and the car, they looked like dried mud, right?
Yes, they appeared like dried mud with a light brown color.
So that's a yes, they looked like dried mud, right?
Oh, yes.
You didn't test any of the mud from the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park, did you?
No, I wasn't sent those samples.
Right, didn't get sent any samples of the dirt from the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park?
No, I wasn't sent any.
No samples from the watering holes at the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park?
No, I wasn't sent any of those samples.
Agent, you weren't sent a single sample from the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park, isn't that right?
None of its natural resources, no.
I want to shift gears, Agent. On direct examination, you said that you were sent samples from 14 different locations. I'm looking. Oh, sorry, go ahead, ma'am.
We were sent 14 different samples, yes.
Looking for a number. How many of those samples were from a woman named Lisa Clark?
We weren't sent any mud samples from Lisa Clark.
So that number's 0, right?
Yes.
So, Agent, you can't tell us whether any algae was on Lisa Clark's shoes, can you?
No, we can't.
Can't tell us if there was any algae on Lisa Clark's clothes, can you?
No, sir.
Can't tell us if any hairs of Don Clark were in Lisa Clark's vehicle, can you?
No, I can't. I was only sent 6 hairs.
Can't tell us if any of Don Clark's blood is in Lisa Clark's vehicle, can you?
No, I wasn't sent any blood samples.
Right, you can't tell us those things because you didn't test a single substance belonging to Lisa Clark. Isn't that right?
That's correct. I wasn't sent any of those substances.
Doctor, on direct examination, you also told us that you didn't find Lisa Clark's fingerprints in the Chevrolet Express, right?
That's correct.
You'd agree with me that when someone puts on gloves, their fingerprints don't get on objects, right?
That's correct.
Thank you, Agent. No further questions.
Redirect, Your Honor. Dr. Grieve, opposing counsel asked you a few questions about Lisa Clark, an algae that might have been on her clothing. Now, would finding algae on Lisa Clark's clothing or boots affect your decision at all in today's case?
No, ma'am, it wouldn't. My analysis would have remained the same.
And why is that?
Because algae being on another substance, it doesn't change its presence on anyone else's. For instance, if this algae was on someone else's boots, it doesn't mean it wouldn't be on Cara Bassett's.
Doctor, how do you know specifically that the algae from Big Gum Swamp matches Miss Bassett's boots?
Oh, there are two things. First, a rare combination of two different types of green algae were at both places. And secondly, the precise Redford ratio of 47 to 31 to 29 of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus at the samples. It's highly likely that they all originated from the same place.
Thank you, doctor. Nothing further.
Mr. Marks, anything else?
Yes, Your Honor. Doctor, you just told Miss Levin the Redfield ratio from the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park. Could you say it again?
I believe it was 47 to 31 to 29.
What's the Redfield ratio of the algae from the Greater Tallahassee Elephant Park?
From its natural resources, I don't have that information.
Thank you, Doctor. No further questions.
Ms. Levin, can we excuse Dr. Grieve?
Yes, Your Honor. No redirect.
Thank you, Dr. Grieve.
And with that, the government rests.
Thank you very much. Before we proceed to the defense case, I want to make sure that everybody's aware of what they just saw, because everybody who's watching this live and participating in the competition probably knows that was a new witness. When people watch this in later years, I want you to know that what you just saw from Ms. Levin, from Mr. Marx, and from Christine Guarnieri playing that witness was nothing short of extraordinary. That was a brand new witness added half an hour before the trial, played by a young woman who'd never played that role before, directed by a woman who didn't know she'd be doing that direct, and cross-examined by a gentleman who didn't know that witness would be part of the case. I think that's the best thing I've seen in the history of this competition, and I was incredibly impressed. So without pointing to either side, I'll just say that was extraordinary by both of you, and the government has rested its case. I'll go back off screen and let Mr. Marks call his first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Miss Jo Young to the stand. Good afternoon, Miss Young. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Of course. I'm Jo Young. I'm a television producer and the co-owner of Florida Studios, right here in Miami.
How'd you get involved in the film industry?
It's actually a funny story. One day I came home, turned on the TV, and there it was. Duck Dynasty. It changed my life.
And ma'am, during your time working in the film industry, did you ever meet someone named Cara Bassett?
Yeah. Kara and I were actually working on an upcoming documentary. My studio focuses a lot on true TV.
I want to start at the beginning. When did Miss Clark, or Miss Bassett rather, first reach out to you?
That would be 2015. Ms. Bassett had a meeting with me just talking about what she wanted to see.
And when you were working on Miss Bassett's documentary, did you visit her elephant park?
Of course.
Would you recognize some photos of that elephant park, ma'am?
Of course.
Mr. Ragnoni, could we get exhibits 23 through 25? They're already in evidence, Your Honor. Do you recognize those photos, ma'am?
Yes, this was Kara's park. It was something like I've never seen before. Truly majestic.
And ma'am, how many days a week were you at that park?
5 days a week. At first it was a little bit difficult, but after a while I loved being there.
And ma'am, after your time working on that project, about how many hours of film would you say you had?
Oh, definitely over 2,000.
During your time working at that park, did you get to know someone named Don Clark pretty well?
Of course I did. Don was Kara's husband. He was really just a goofy guy. The kids at the park loved him.
Did you get to know someone named Kara Bassett? Do you know her well?
Of course I know Kara well. She's the Elephant Queen.
I want to talk about the story between the Elephant Queen and Don Clark, ma'am. Did you see them be affectionate with one another when you were working at the park?
All the time. And you didn't hear it from me, but they are the best couple there is.
And ma'am, did you ever see any signs of infidelity or witness anything like that?
Of course not.
Did you ever see Kara lay a hand on her husband?
No.
Did you witness Kara and Don argue about something, disagree?
Well, of course. It happens when you mix family and business. Trust me.
So, ma'am, I want to shift gears and talk about one day in particular. Where were you on August 18th, 2017?
I would have been at the park that day. Definitely.
What were you doing for the majority of that day? Do you remember?
Well, it was business as usual. Filming Kara, filming people at the park. Nothing out of the ordinary.
From what you could see, was there anything different in the way Miss Bassett was behaving?
Not that I could see.
Did you see Don Clark at all on August 18th?
Of course. It was business as usual.
Did you notice anything different in the way that Don Clark was behaving?
To me, he seemed the same.
And ma'am, after August 18th, 2017, have you ever seen Don Clark again?
No.
Ma'am, let's talk about what happened after Don Clark disappeared. Ma'am, were you made aware of the FBI investigation into his disappearance?
In 2018, actually, the course of the documentary shifted, and I grew very interested in the FBI's investigation.
And ma'am, during that FBI investigation, did the agents ask you any questions?
They did, but barely.
You told us earlier that you had over 2,000 hours of footage. Did the FBI agents ask to see that?
No.
So, ma'am, I want to talk about a different story. We've talked a lot about Kara and Don. Want to talk about Don's other spouse. Do you know who Lisa Clark is?
Of course I know Lisa. Trust me, if you were at that park, Lisa came by a couple of times. Maybe you'd seen them.
And we'll talk about those visits in a few moments because they're important. I want to start by talking about Don's obituary. Have you read it?
I'm not one to read the paper, but that article was really one I'll never forget.
In that article that you read, did it say anything about a legal dispute between Don and Lisa Clark?
It did mention something about Lisa Clark wanting to take control of $2 million of Don's assets.
And ma'am, did you ever see Lisa Clark at the park?
Yes, I did. I remember this one time. Things just escalated so much, the cops got involved.
Let's break that down. Was Lisa Clark yelling anything at Don?
She was yelling, "I'll wipe you off the face of this earth."
And ma'am, what did Don Clark do in response?
He called the police. Lisa was getting angry.
We talked about August 18th a few moments ago. After August 18th, were you interviewed at all?
No. I was actually interviewed by someone other than the FBI. It was a TV segment, something like 60 Minutes.
In that TV segment, were you shown Don Clark's phone records?
Yeah, I do remember the host showing me those.
Mr. Ragnoni, could we get Exhibit 21 on the screen? Again, Your Honor, it's pre-admitted. Could you zoom in, Mr. Ragnoni, on that call from Lisa Clark, or that text? Could you read that text, ma'am?
I'm tired of the lawyers. Can we please resolve this on our own, like adults?
Thank you, ma'am. Nothing further.
Cross-examination, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Good afternoon, Miss Young.
Good afternoon.
Let's begin by talking about the relationship between the defendant and her husband. The two of them owned an elephant park together, right?
That's correct. I was actually filming it for a documentary.
But the defendant wanted to turn that park into a sanctuary. That's what she told you. True?
That's correct.
Could you pull up Exhibit 38 from your digital binder? Let me know when you get there.
Ma'am, I have it up right now.
This is an interview you took of the defendant in June of 2017. True?
This is correct. I was actually waiting to put this in the documentary, but I guess the cat's out of the bag now.
As far as you know, this hasn't been altered in any way since you took the interview in June, right?
No, my work is excellent.
At this time, we offer Exhibit 38 into evidence.
Without objection, Your Honor.
Admitted.
Mr. Condi, could we get Exhibit 38 up now for the jury? And could we play that now for the jury?
Go ahead.
I can't actually hear what it's saying.
Perhaps we could restart the video, and this time when you share your screen, click the button to include sound.
Pardon me, Your Honor. I'm assuming my second chair is experiencing some technical difficulties right now.
It's all right. We'll get sorted out. Okay.
Mr. Condi, could we try putting that up again? Mr. Condi, are you with us? Your Honor, I'll move on.
No, I think we got it. You're all set. Go ahead.
Your Honor, I'm sorry. I think this might be something is technically wrong with my second chair's computer or audio right now, but I actually think I don't need the video. I can continue on without it. Assuming it's in evidence, I can simply ask Ms. Young about the contents of the video.
That's fine.
Ms. Young, you're aware that in that interview, the defendant said she would do anything to protect her elephants, right?
Yeah, I think she even mentioned lobbying senators. Yeah.
She actually said she would take people to their graves to protect the elephants. True?
I believe that's what she said.
She said she would take people to their graves. Miss Young, you're aware of one person at least that the defendant was fighting about over how to run her elephant park. True?
Yes, I think I know who you're talking about.
You witnessed multiple fights between the defendant and her husband concerning how their elephant park should be run.
Fights, arguments, it's up to your discretion.
Well, you saw these disagreements up until about July or August of 2017, right?
Yeah, I would say about that time, July-ish.
Now, Ms. Young, even though you were recording the two of them for your documentary, you actually don't have any record of any of these fights, right?
That's correct. As a television producer, it's not my job to go poking around in other people's business.
Well, actually, Ms. Young, the reason you don't have any record of these fights is because the defendant always made you turn the camera off when she was fighting with her husband.
On specific occasions, yes. I mean, I wouldn't want my fights shown to national television either.
And the specific occasions you're referencing are when the defendant was fighting with her husband, right?
I believe so.
Miss Young, let's move now and talk about the events following August 18th. Mr. Cundy, could we get Exhibit 22 up for the jury? Miss Young, these are Carabassett's phone records, right?
Yeah, I was actually shown them on live television. It was the first time I ever saw them.
So you're aware the defendant didn't try to contact her husband via phone after August 18th, right?
Not with her phone. I'm not sure if she did something else, though.
You're also aware she waited 7 days following August 18th to call the police?
And that's what I was told. I was actually on this big trip to Mexico, so I didn't exactly see what was going on.
Let's talk a little bit about that trip. You got back from Mexico on August 26th, right?
Yes, it was another day on the job.
Observed the defendant's behavior in the weeks that followed.
That's what I was paid to do.
And you felt the defendant seemed devastated following her husband's disappearance. True?
That's correct. I mean, who wouldn't be devastated?
Miss Young, you thought that devastation lasted about a week, right?
Yeah, an entire week. She was really devastated.
A week from August 26th is approximately September 3rd, right?
If I'm calculating correct, yes.
So Miss Young, isn't September 3rd the day the FBI left the Elephant Park?
I believe that's correct.
So what you're telling us is that Miss Bassett stopped seeming so devastated following her husband's disappearance at around the same time the FBI left her home. True?
I guess you could say that. It was actually on Christmas Eve. I filmed this video, and Miss Bassett was talking about how sad she was to not have Dawn around anymore.
Miss Bassett, I'm not asking you about Christmas Eve. We're talking specifically about the events following August 18th. It's your testimony that Miss Bassett stopped seeming so devastated following her husband's disappearance at around the same time the FBI left her home. Yes or no?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Miss Young. Nothing further.
Anything else, Mr. Marks?
Yes, Your Honor. Miss Young, Miss Levin just asked you about a quote from Cara Bassett, where she said she wanted to take people to her grave. Did you ever hear Lisa Clark threatening to kill Dawn?
Yeah, I did. I still remember it. I will wipe you off the face of this earth.
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Response, Your Honor?
It's overruled.
Ma'am, just so for the clear record, could you give us that quote one more time?
I will wipe you off the face of this earth.
Thank you, ma'am. Nothing further at the time, Your Honor.
Ms. Levin, any recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay. Anything further from the parties before we go to closing arguments?
No, Your Honor, the defense rests.
Okay. I'll ask our judges. I'm inclined to go straight to closing arguments. If you need a break, send me a message in the chat. Hearing none, we will proceed to closing arguments. Before Ms. Levin proceeds, can I get a time check from our timekeepers, please? So we know how much time remains for each closing. I see 11:25 for defense. The government, you can put it in the chat. Ms. Levin is 10:45. Is everybody in agreement? Great.
We're good to go, Your Honor.
Okay, so Ms. Levin, you've got 10:45. Mr. Marks, you have 11:25. I will remind you, you need not use all of it. Okay, you can proceed.
She wanted control. She killed for it. On August 18th, 2017, the defendant crept up on her sleeping husband, injected him with a lethal drug. She killed him. It's that simple. Members of the jury, you were presented with a lot of evidence throughout today's trial, but one thing was repeated over and over by both the government and the defense, by both witnesses. Above all else, the defendant wanted control. And you heard how she took a concrete step to get it. You heard about a power of attorney. The document that offered Ms. Bassett full control over all of her husband's assets, all of his properties if her husband ever disappeared. Members of the jury, that clause isn't standard. It's highly irregular. The only reason that clause was included was because the defendant insisted on it. That's motive. And you heard about the overwhelming physical evidence that ties the defendant to the crime. You heard about a syringe of carfentanil. It's a drug so dangerous, it's 5,000 times more toxic than heroin. It's a drug Agent Branham asked the defendant about. Agent Branham asked the defendant, and the defendant laughed. She said a few drops can kill someone. Members of the jury, she was right about that. And we know the defendant put that knowledge to use. Because you heard that when Don Clark went missing, a syringe of that lethal drug went missing too. And you also heard, we know exactly what the defendant did after she put that knowledge to use. You learned how she drove from the Elephant Park to Big Gum Swamp where she disposed of her husband's body. We know she was the one who made that drive. We have the forensic evidence to prove it. You heard about a rare combination of algae, a rare combination found at Big Gum Swamp, the same combination on Miss Bassett's boots, the same combination on the gas pedal of that van. Members of the jury, it's true. Agent Branham didn't collect a sample of algae from the Elephant Park. But you heard today from Dr. Grieve. She told you that wasn't necessary because these samples of algae weren't just one type of algae. These were two types combined in all three locations. Members of the jury, that's not a coincidence, that's forensic proof. And if you still have doubt, I urge you to consider the defendant's response to her husband's disappearance. Because you heard that after Don Clark, Kara Bassett's husband of 6 years, disappeared, the defendant didn't call him. She didn't text him. Why? Because she knew he wouldn't respond. The defendant waited 7 days after her husband went missing to call the police. Why? Because she already knew where he was. The defendant seemed devastated about her husband's disappearance for about a week. Why a week? Well, you heard from Miss Young, the defense's own witness. Miss Bassett stopped seeming so devastated about her husband's disappearance at the exact same time the FBI left her home. Why? Because that devastation was an act, members of the jury, an act the defendant stopped the second she was no longer being watched. Now, defense counsel, they're about to get up here in a few moments, and they're going to tell you it's possible Lisa Clark was responsible for her ex-husband's disappearance. Members of the jury, it's true. Lisa Clark didn't like her ex-husband. She disagreed with him. But members of the jury, we know what Lisa Clark did when Don Clark disappeared. Lisa Clark did call her husband. Lisa Clark did text her ex-husband. Lisa Clark actually texted Don Clark that if He didn't get back to her. She would kill him in court. Members of the jury, why would Miss Clark threaten Don Clark if he had already disappeared, if she had already killed him? It was the defendant who didn't contact her husband when he went missing. It was the defendant who wanted control and killed for it. Members of the jury, it's not a coincidence that there is direct forensic proof tying the defendant to the crime. It's not a coincidence the defendant waited 7 days to call the police. It's not a coincidence a syringe of a lethal drug went missing when Don Clark did. Members of the jury, none of those are coincidences because that kind of evidence just doesn't pile up against innocent people. The defendant is not innocent. Members of the jury, we have the burden. I'm not suggesting that we don't. But we don't have to eliminate all doubt. We only have to eliminate reasonable doubt. So when defense counsel tells you about their theory, you have to ask yourselves, is what they're telling you reasonable? Or is it just an extension of the defendant's cover-up? We're confident it is. We're confident Kara Bassett, and only Kara Bassett, is responsible. Find her guilty. Thank you.
You can proceed, Mr. Marx.
Yes, Your Honor.
And I'll ask the second chairs to privately message Ms. Levin how much time she has for rebuttal.
Judge Bernstein, Ms. Levin, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we know what Lisa Clark did when Don disappeared. That's what Ms. Levin just told you. But do we know what Lisa Clark was doing when Don disappeared? Because that's not what Agent Branham told us. On cross-examination, I asked Agent Branham, I said, do you have an alibi for Lisa Clark? Agent Branham said, no. Agent Branham said, we didn't investigate. And then on the cross-examination of Dr. Grieve, I got up there and I asked her, of the 14 different samples you tested, how many of them came from Lisa Clark? What was her answer? 0. The government doesn't know where Lisa Clark was. And it's true. And today we haven't been able to tell you exactly where Lisa Clark was, but that wasn't our responsibility. Like Ms. Levin told you, we don't have a burden today. We didn't have to prove where Lisa Clark was. The government had to prove that Lisa Clark couldn't have committed this crime, and they did not do that. Ms. Levin also told you that we don't have to eliminate doubt. We just have to eliminate reasonable doubt, and that's true as well. But let's talk about how the government and the FBI tried to eliminate doubt. Did they look at Miss Clark's car to see if Don's hair was there? Did they look at Miss Clark's cell phone records to see where she was on the night of August 18th? Did they search her house? I mean, ladies and gentlemen, Don Clark's body could be in Lisa Clark's garage and we would have no clue. Why? Because they didn't try to eliminate all doubt. They latched onto a suspect. They latched onto a spouse and they got it wrong. But today, it was the government's job to get that story right. Today, all day, it was the government who bore the burden of proof. They had to prove every single element of their charge beyond a reasonable doubt. We'll talk about that standard in a couple of moments, how it's the highest standard in the American legal system, but for the moment, all you need to know is that the government has not met that standard. Let's talk about that FBI investigation. Agent Branham told you that the only physical piece of evidence connecting Miss Bassett to that crime is the algae. There's no DNA, no tread impressions, no eyewitnesses, no cell data, no video recording, no blood, no hairs at the swamp. There's nothing. So let's talk about that algae. Today on cross-examination, we talked to Dr. Green. And it's true. The same species of algae at the Big Gum Swamp were also on Miss Bassett's boots. But it isn't that simple. Maybe it would be that simple if Miss Bassett worked at a restaurant or an office or a school or a hospital, but she doesn't. Maybe it would be that simple if the government had tested any of the mud or the dirt or the watering holes or the puddles or anywhere else on the 3,200-acre elephant park where algae can be. But the government did it. And because of that, there are still unanswered questions. And you cannot find the defendant guilty. They've got the wrong spouse. And the reason their case has so many unanswered questions is because they're telling the wrong story. I mean, the FBI just wants to tell you that you can ignore Lisa Clark, that she's not a suspect, that she doesn't matter. Members of the jury, yes, she does. Let's compare what the FBI heard when they talked to Lisa and Kara. FBI goes to Kara Bassett. Says, we'd like to ask you a few questions. Ms. Bassett says, that's fine. I have nothing to hide. I'm happy to cooperate. But then the FBI goes to Lisa Clark. What does she say? She doesn't say, I'm happy to talk to you. She doesn't say, no, thank you. I don't feel like answering your question. She says that expletive deserved to die. What does the FBI do? Nothing. They don't search her house. Don't subpoena her phone records. Don't investigate the woman who was suing Don for $2 million and had threatened to kill him in the past. Don't identify an alibi. And because of that fact, there are still unanswered questions. Instead, they try to direct your attention to Kara Bassett. Tell you that Lisa doesn't matter because she sent Don a few text messages. Members of the jury, it's not hard to cover up your crime by sending some text messages. That doesn't exonerate Lisa Clark. I will wipe you off the face of the earth. That expletive deserved to die. We know exactly how Lisa Clark felt about her husband. What we don't know is where she was. They've got the wrong spouse, and they're telling the wrong story. But ladies and gentlemen, the government can't even get that story straight. On the one hand, they want you to look at the power of attorney document and say this is proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Miss Bassett had a motive to kill her husband, that she wanted to kill for control. But then the restraining order that Don got about Lisa Clark, it doesn't matter. Members of the jury, yes, it does. But that's not the only thing that doesn't add up in their story. On the one hand, the government wants to tell you that Lisa Clark was or Kara Bassett rather, was such an ingenious criminal mastermind that she could hide Don's body so well that a team of FBI agents, forensic analysts, and police officers couldn't find a single scrap of evidence at the swamp. But she's not smart enough to sign her initials on a tranquilizer log. I mean, on Agent Branham's cross-examination, we learned that Kara had an entire week to burn her shoes, burn her clothes, ditch the van, cover up the carfentanil, burn that log. Why didn't she do it? Maybe she didn't do it because she didn't have anything to cover up. Ladies and gentlemen, there are so many reasonable doubts in this case. Now, I promise I talked to you about that standard. The way it works is that whenever we reach a presumption, where a point in the government's case, where a presumption need be made, the only one you can make is innocence. Let me give you an example. When the government says that Kara Bassett stabbed her husband with carfentanil, but we know that other people had access to that drug. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of ways we could patch that up. A lot of presumptions we can make. The presumption the law requires you to make is innocence. But when the government tells you that that algae was from the Big Gum Swamp, but we don't know what they would have found had they tested anything from the greater Tallahassee Elephant Park, presumption, innocence, members of the jury. There are so many unanswered questions, so many presumptions they're asking you to make. But the only one you can make is innocence. That's reasonable doubt. They've got the wrong spouse. They're telling the wrong story. So we're confident that you'll find the defendant not guilty. Thank you.
Rebuttal.
You may proceed.
Members of the jury, defense counsel told you that they've provided you with reasonable doubt, that Lisa Clark is reasonable doubt. Let's talk about that. You heard today that Lisa Clark was suing her ex-husband, Don Clark, for $2 million. Members of the jury, why would Lisa Clark kill Don Clark before she would be able to receive that money? It was the defendant who had a direct financial motive. It was the defendant who would gain millions of dollars, control over all of her husband's properties and assets if he ever disappeared. Members of the jury, you also heard about fingerprint testing. You heard Lisa Clark's fingerprints aren't on the van. It's the defendant's fingerprints on the van that was driven to Big Gum Swamp. It's the defendant who disposed of her husband's body at that swamp. And you heard today about those text messages. Now, defense counsel told you it's possible Lisa Clark was trying to cover up her crime, and that's why she sent texts to Don Clark following his disappearance. Members of the jury, I want to be very clear about the text Lisa Clark sent. She said, if you don't get back to me, I'll kill you in court. Members of the jury, why would Lisa Clark threaten her husband if she was trying to cover up her crime? Members of the jury, that doesn't make any sense. That's not reasonable doubt. It was the defendant who didn't contact her husband. It was the defendant who wanted control and kill for it. There's one reasonable spouse. There is one reasonable story. There's one reasonable suspect. Members of the jury, when you go back to the deliberation room, you'll be asked to consider the totality of the evidence. That means you can't focus on just one point, just one piece of evidence. You have to focus on it all in totality. The totality of the evidence points towards the defendant as the only reasonable suspect. There's forensic proof. There's GPS data. There's a syringe of carfentanil that went missing. There's the amount of time the defendant waited to call the police. There's the fact that the defendant didn't call or text her husband. Members of the jury, all of that together is proof. Definitive proof. She's responsible. Kara Bassett is responsible. Find her guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. We're going to submit this matter to our jury. Jurors, please submit your ballots. Once all the ballots are submitted, we'll begin comments. Okay, I believe all of the ballots have been submitted. I want to make sure I didn't miss any of our jurors. I have ballots from Phil Pasquarello, Kyle DeCamp, Jess Falkenstein, Stephen Johnson, Bill Schreier, Glenn Helva Neubauer, Abby Branham, Melissa Watt, Will Warahay, Audrey Shepard, Sue Johnson, and Megna Milcote. Have I missed anybody? Okay, great. Can I get our judges to please appear on screen? And can I get our witnesses on screen, please? And finally, can we get our second chairs on screen? So I want to start, can we give a Zoom round of applause to our outstanding second chairs? Maddie, do you want to introduce your second chair? Actually, you should tell us where you're from and tell us who your second chair is.
Sure. I go to the Menlo School. Jackson Cundy also goes to Menlo with me. We've been on the same mock team for the past 3 years now. We're both rising seniors. And yeah, we've had so much fun at this tournament.
Thank you. Now, Maddie mentioned she goes to the Menlo School in California. That's the reason why you didn't hear that the ballots were submitted from Andy Parker and Tiffany Tam. When you have a Menlo person in the final round, you have to disqualify the Menlo alums, that you lose a lot of your final round, because Menlo has been in so many of our final rounds and has been such an extraordinary participant in this competition. Ethan, want to introduce yourself in your second chair?
Sure. I'm Ethan Marx, Indian Hill High School in Ohio. My second chair is Michael Ragnoni. He just graduated. He's going to be going to OSU.
Thank you both. You are both terrific second chairs. Can we get our witnesses to introduce themselves? Start with Mr. Wright.
Hey everyone, my name is Connor Wright. I'm a junior at Venture Academy. I'm a rising senior.
Ms. Nunes?
Hi, I'm Brooke Nunes. I'm going to be a senior at Moreau Catholic this fall, and this was a great round. Both the attorneys did amazing.
Christine?
Hi, I'm Christine Guarnieri. I go to Henrico High School in Virginia, and I'm also a rising senior.
You were all terrific, and I singled out Christine because she had to do this with essentially no prep on a document that she'd only had to read as a cross-examiner, and that was just extraordinary. That was awesome.
Thank you.
I'm going to do some tabulation, so I'm going to disappear from the screen. I'm going to ask Melissa Watt if she would become our moderator and sort of go from panelist to panelist. If we can find out each person's favorite part of the round for each of the competitors, that'd be great. Missy?
Okay, I'm just gonna go by order of how you appear on my screen. So first up will be Bill Schreier.
Favorite thing from the trial? I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I'm in awe. I'll tell you what my least favorite thing though is when Maddie said she's a rising senior. I'm like, oh no. That was fantastic. So good. Congratulations.
Phil, you're up next.
Sure. I'm glad that I get to go second, because I'm going to steal the favorite moment that I'm sure everyone really wants to say. And for me, it was Ethan, your recross of the expert witness asking about what I didn't know was a term before this, but the Redfield ratio. That means something scientific related to mud. And when you asked what the Redfield ratio was of the place that, of course, the expert never tested, it was just phenomenal. This was, I'd say, one of the best final rounds I've ever seen, not only at this tournament, but at the high school, college, or law school level. Just fantastic, both of you.
Stephen Johnson.
Hi. Yeah, this was incredible. And I would echo for Ethan, the best point in the round for you was what Phil said, that recross examination. For Maddie, I thought, in the same vein, the way that you were both reacting so well to each other's theory, your rebuttal was great. And when you question why she would threaten him in the text message if she was trying to cover up her crime, I thought that was the best part of that rebuttal, and I enjoyed that a lot. But great job, both of you.
Kyle DeCamp.
You two are unbelievable. It is unreal how good you guys are. But I'll echo Phil. Ethan, your cross and your recross were both just outstanding, so superb. And Maddie, your closing literally gave me chills at one point. It was just one of the best closings I've seen all year across all the different kinds of mock trial I watched. So good.
Glenn.
Well, I will echo the my co-judges. What a phenomenal final round. You're both such talented young people. I have to say that as a political science professor and not a lawyer, I'm looking for things that are really clear and understandable. And I really so enjoyed Maddie's opening statement. It really set things out for me in a way that I could follow along. And Ethan, I just absolutely loved those exhibits. They were things of beauty, and they made your case come alive. Congratulations to both of you.
Will.
Hey everyone, I of course echo what the other judges have said. This was absolutely phenomenal. The mock trial voices are strong in both of you, which to change up the compliments, I would say just both of you, your presence, your confidence, how dynamic you were in your presentation. It was just, it's amazing. I've been doing this such a long time that to see high schoolers and Maddie, to hear that you're a rising senior, so you're a junior doing this, it's incredible. The confidence that you have at the age that you're doing it. I'm very impressed and very terrified of when you join the college circuit, of course, if you don't come to Georgia Tech.
Abby.
Yeah, I'll echo what the other judges have said. I am just floored. Both of you are just fantastic. To be so young, it's just insane. What we all just got to watch you both do is just incredible. You both were so prepared. You both were so reactive. Ethan, I'll say specifically your command of the facts of the case, your command of the evidence and rules, your objections were phenomenal. Maddie, your presence was just amazing. So I'm very grateful I didn't have to go up against either of you last year. You're both so fantastic, and just congratulations, both of you are. You'll go so far if you continue to do mock trial. Congratulations.
Jess.
Like everyone said, this was such a fun round to watch. This is probably my 10th of this trial that I'm watching, between this and trial by combat, and I was hanging on to every word. You guys were both phenomenal. Maddie, I thought your directive of the agent was so well done. It was so easy to follow. I knew exactly where you were going. Ethan, in your opening, when you incorporated for Maddie's opening her theme seamlessly, as if it was part of your scripted opening, it was very impressive to watch. You guys were both phenomenal advocates, and I'm excited to see how you guys progress in the future.
Audrey.
A lot of you stole what I was going to say. So I guess I'll go. When I'm watching trials, something that I really pay attention to is how your personality is coming out in the round. I want to see that you are being yourself, right, in the moment. And I think that for Ethan, that really happened in the beginning of your closing. We had a moment where you were looking at us as the jury, and that's already hard to do over Zoom. You were looking at us, and we felt like you were engaging with us, and you were communicating a story to us. And I'll say that for Maddie, I think that came out on your cross when you were dealing with a witness who wasn't agreeing with you entirely. I think you did a really good job of having this attitude of, the prosecutor. I'm above this. Like, I'm going to get my facts. I'm going to get in and out, and I'm not going to really put up with you being troublesome for me in my cross-examination. So I thought that you both did a really excellent job of showing us who you were in the courtroom. And those were the 2 times that I saw that come out.
Andy Parker.
This trial was just completely amazing. I feel sort of lucky I didn't have a ballot because I didn't have to decide who got the check mark at different points. I think for both of you, you had amazing high points during your closing where I really felt like you as an advocate just believed in the case that you were selling to us as a jury. I think on the government side, that really came out on the rebuttal. I just have pages and pages of highlights here. I think on the defense side, there was this line of the body could be in Lisa Clark's garage and we'd have no clue. And it was said in just such a way that I was like, you're so, like, that's such a good point. And I really felt like you believed it when you sold it to us. So I think on both sides, just the closings were astounding.
Meghna?
Like everyone else said, this was an amazing round. I think this is one of the best rounds of mock trial that I've just ever seen. It was so persuasive. It was so polished. And I'd echo what everyone said. And particularly, Maddie, I think one of your best moments in the trial was your opening, because you did such a good job kind of arguing your case, but still presenting the facts. And I like the kind of more argumentative openings, but you also really described everything really well. So I kind of liked how you were able to tread that line well. And then Ethan, you had this line, your crosses were fantastic. I thought they were just so like damning. You had this line that was like, there are some things forensics can't tell us, as your first question. And I thought that was just such a strong way to begin the cross, especially when they said that this was the new witness. That was unbelievable. I thought it was crazy how polished the new witness was for direct and cross.
Sue?
It's hard coming this late in the lineup because everybody's already commented on how wonderful the whole trial was. So I guess the one thing I could say that hasn't been commented on so much yet is I thought you both did a superb job of using the space such as you have and being very persuasive and using tone of voice and pacing and all those things to where it didn't feel necessarily like we were watching you on Zoom. I felt like we were right there and you were really able to tell your stories and communicate in a way that was very persuasive and believable. So kudos to everyone. And that goes for the witnesses as well as the attorneys. Well done.
And Tiffany?
Like Andy, I'm also very grateful that I didn't have to score this round because you were both fantastic. I would say for Ethan, my high point for you was how well your closing tied together your theory and your case. That really stood out to me. And Maddie, I would say your rebuttal was excellent, especially your point about the totality of the evidence. I thought like that was what really made me convinced about your case in chief, because you were like doing very well, but then that totality point, like, yeah, like prosecutors have to say that, but I thought that was very excellent.
Okay, I guess I'm last, so I will go quickly and then just say that the high point for me was Ethan. I thought that rebuttal, I will say again, I think you were borderline, you were getting pretty close to being repetitive, but it was such a smart move. And on that same line, Maddie, your use of the call log and the text messages on your redirect was so smart. It was so reactionary. I don't know if you had that planned, but I was sitting here listening to the class going, huh? And then you got up and you were like, no, wait, this. And I was like, oh, that's so smart. And it made me excited because I just loved how you used it.
Missy, we heard from all of our judges.
I believe so. If I missed somebody, please speak up now.
Maddie, do you want to introduce or thank your coaches or recognize anybody who helped you prepare for this competition?
Yes, I would. My coach was Liz Grant. She's actually, she's a Stanford student. She does mock trial at Stanford, and I've just been so lucky to have her as a coach. Tracy Tiefenthaler is also the head coach at Menlo, and she helped me prepare for this tournament. The both of them have been just fantastic.
I know Liz well. She's a former Gladiator playoff competitor, so we are thrilled to have her back. Ethan?
Coach Rieger from Indian Hill, amazing. Taught everything. It's amazing. Albert Kwan, Sarah Kaplan, James Orr, Dan Peel, all those people, provided some great feedback, and they're just awesome people.
This was an extraordinary final round. I think this is probably our most competitive, highest quality final round we've ever had. And the fact that it happened over Zoom, you guys dealt with the challenge and came out as champions. It was extraordinary. I'll quickly share my favorite parts of the trial. Maddie, there were a lot to choose among. I think the beginning of your rebuttal was my favorite because you said, none of this makes any sense. You don't kill for money if you're not getting any of it. And Ethan, I thought that your recross examination was just dynamite. I don't usually like recrosses. I think they're dangerous. You almost always lose points there. And I thought, wow, your cross, you're doing so well. Why would you recross? That's why. That was really phenomenal. Normally, I would be handing somebody a gladiator helmet. So instead of being able to put it on your head and take a ridiculous photograph, we will instead be mailing it to you. But I will announce this year's gladiator champion. This will come as no surprise. This was a split decision because anybody who watched this round, of course, this was a split decision. We had 12 ballots. It was 7-5. The winner won 4 of their 7 ballots by a single check mark. This was razor close. This year's gladiator champion, Ethan Marx. Congratulations, Ethan.
Thank you so much. Maddie, you were phenomenal. Insane. Insane.
Thank you. You are amazing. Congratulations.
Well, you guys, everyone was awesome. And Brooke, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Congratulations. Good luck. Thanks for competing.
Congrats, Maddie.
Congrats, everyone.
Thanks, everybody, for watching Gladiator 2020. I hope you enjoyed the trial.